Welcome to this episode of Growth Island. Today we're going to talk more about how do you present something well? How do you show up and show the best version of yourself when you're speaking with others? And for that, I got a special guest in that I actually worked with, and I thought I was good at presenting, and I often got feedback on being good at presenting. But I met a lot of speaking coaches and pitch coaches and so on, and often I feel like they don't really bring anything extra. But this person was different, and she could tell me something they couldn't hear first, but I could see the feedback from the room when I was speaking, and I could feel it was like almost hurting in my jaw because it didn't feel as natural, but it gave a different way of actually speaking. So since then, I was pretty intrigued about learning more about that. And it's Lisbeth Holdt Jørgensen. Lisbeth has a company called Voice Incorporated. She's a former actor. She is also a former instructor at the Royal Danish Theatre Theatre. And she also used to coach TEDx speakers as well as SPAT. And generally, she works with so many people on how to get their voice better and how to present their messages well. So Lisbeth, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Lisbeth, how did you get into all of this voice and speaking coaching?
Well, as many things in life, by accident. Well, it actually began because I, as an actress, was sort of defocused. When I was on stage, I wasn't sort of feeling I was present. And that was something that I compared with before I got into acting school and then after acting school. So something happened during that time on acting school. And I found out that I was so much focused on technique.
Oh.
Because, no, this is not right. This is the right way of breathing. No, this is the right way of breathing. So in all this search of getting the right sort of technique, I sort of lost myself.
Oh.
So I tried to be the good actress. But by doing that, I sort of lost my presence. I lost my creativity. I lost my confidence in myself because I always had this judgment. This is not right. You need to do it right. So I was sort of beside myself. And then one day on stage, I got this moment where suddenly it all came back to me. Time sort of stopped, and I felt that the audience was not judges over me. We were together in something. We were creating something together. And the room was not difficult to speak. I knew that when I opened my mouth, my voice would fill that room, that space with good, natural voice. And I had this huge feeling of energy. So it was sort of a peak flow experience. And after that, I went back to my former teacher at the acting school, and he was the director of the Royal Theatre. And I said, now I understand what you tried to teach me at school. And then he looked at me and said, why don't you become a voice coach? I think you would be good at that. And I'm sort of, excuse me. I thought I was going to be a good actress now. And then he sort of, try to think about it. Because when you're coming in that age where you sort of get to about 40, there are no parts for you. I mean, they're all men. Just look at Shakespeare. There's 1, 2 women, perhaps, but rest is men. So there's not so many parts for people in my gender and in my age.
Yep.
So I thought, well, maybe I should, before the parts come back, I could go out, and I got curious to see, okay, let's see what's happened there. And I had my old master. I was also before that, I was interested in voice. So my own voice, developing my voice. And I had this teacher who was also a voice coach at the Royal Theatre. And I went down to him and said, if I tried to become a voice coach, would you help? And he was a big guy. And he said, wow, do you really want to do it? I will give you everything. I will help you. I will teach you. I will do anything. So I became his student. And then I began studying at the university to become a voice and speech therapist, and also took some topics on rhetorics. So I vacuumed the university for everything that had to do with voice. Yeah. So and then after finishing my bachelor, I came back to the Royal Theatre, became a voice coach in there. So after 2 years, I had to teach my former colleagues, telling them how to perform better. Yeah.
Interesting journey.
Mm.
But it's so fascinating how we can use our words. And I can't stop thinking about what you just told me about, like learning all these techniques. Then because I'm starting to facilitate at Camp 2 North.
Okay.
And I work with a guy called Henrik, who is like one of the most skilled facilitator, especially, techniques. Like spot on, and like I love getting feedback from him because it's like using that word or that word if you change that.
Yeah.
But there's also that kind of balance for me of like focusing so on some techniques and just being there.
Yeah.
And being present. And I know like when I'm the best, I love to facilitate and teach. And I'm not thinking at all. I'm only in my heart. And when I'm thinking too much about techniques, I'm not in my heart, so I'm communicating from a different position.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also the observation that I made for the actors, for instance, that if I had an actress, for instance, and you could see that 90% of her lines were good. They were there. I could feel that she was present. Her intonation, her tempo, it was variated, and she didn't hurt her voice by acting or anything. And then perhaps it was 10% that was sort of not right. Or right is the wrong word, but there was something missing.
Oh.
And then I looked at that and I said, okay, it's not her general technique that is wrong.
No.
Because then it would be scattered all over. I mean, if there was some vowels or consonants that she couldn't say, I mean, then it would be scattered all over. But there was something different. It was in the situation. She was doing something that was not bringing her to that spot where she was in flow. So instead of looking at what is wrong, the tempo is wrong, the volume is not right, then I looked and said, okay, let's look at what is happening when you have the 90%. So then I saw, okay, what is there when things are good, when she is in flow and she's present and everything. And then I sort of taking those principles from there and then turning it over to the 10% and say, try to do this. Instead of focusing, no, in this line, you need to do, and you need to, because your volume drops at the endings and all that. That was technique details. So instead I tried to focus on how can I sort of trick her, hack her to do something that will fix those symptoms.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on symptoms, I looked at the reasons why we speak clearly and are present.
And what are some of those?
That is, for instance, if then you can do that everywhere. So for instance, who is the judge of which volume you need to speak with?
Yeah.
Well, usually sometimes the audience will be the judges saying, okay, no, you need to speak louder because I can't hear you. And then as a speaker, I become sort of defocused and say, okay, someone is judging me. I'm doing something wrong. I need to fix it. And then it becomes sort of a performance, can you hear me now? So I sort of shout a little to make sure that person gets what they want. So I'm sort of defocusing because I'm fulfilling their need. It's not my need. So try to get that control back. So for instance, if you can hear your own echo, you're not supposed to listen for what you're saying, but just feel the resonance of your voice in the room, that you say, okay, I can feel that my voice bounces back from the walls. And then I know if I can hear myself, then the audience can also, because we are in the same room together. So it creates sort of a good relationship to the room, but also the audience, because when you listen for your own echo, your own body will speak louder in a way that you can endure to hold on to and be in, because does this feel good? It does. Yes. So I can do that. So it helps you to motivate your body to speak up with a higher volume, because we can speak with a higher volume. We just let the body do what it's best at, and instead of focusing on technique.
Yeah. And it's so interesting how to get to it, because I think that was one of the things you told me, that I should listen to my echo.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time hearing my echo. I was like, oh, my echo.
Yeah.
Like, how do I find that? So like, how do you become more aware of, I'm sitting and thinking about now, can I hear my echo here? Like, I think I kind of can.
Yeah.
But how do you do that for someone listening?
Well, there's a practical part. You can change different rooms. You can go into a church, because a church has a big echo, and you can walk into a staircase, for instance, or in the bathroom or wherever. And then listen for what it sounds like there. So you can sort of explore different echoes. But there's also something physical happening with us when we are sharpening our ears. Because when we really want to listen for something, if we're in a forest and I'm listening for a sound, did I hear something? Or if I'm a parent and I hear, was it my child crying or whatever? Then I'm sort of doing something with my body. My body is sort of rising and lifting, and I'm actually using some muscles that are connected to my inner ears, and that's connected to the soft palate. So when I'm sharpening my ears, something physical is happening inside of me. And that is helping your voice, because when you rise the soft palate, your larynx will lower itself and there will be good space for your voice and so on and so on. So if you do not sort of have an echo, you can go for that physical, I'm sort of sharpening my ears, so you can get that physical response in your body.
Interesting.
And that is very, also because when you listen for your own echo, something happens to our faces, because then I'm listening for the human voice. And when I'm listening for the human voice, our inner ears tunes into that frequency band that is linked to the human voice. And that tells me that I'm in a safe social environment. So I can shut out noise. So that listening for your ears, for your echo, or doing that with your muscles, opens your face so that you are actually open towards other people. You're inviting. I'm showing you that I'm in a safe social interaction with you. If I shut down, you can look at my face and see what happens when I shut down listening for my echo. My face does this.
Yeah.
And listen for what's happening to my voice now. Can you hear that it's not so resonant, and it sort of becomes a little flat, and my articulation becomes a little more flat? But when I'm doing like this, so now I'm just doing that muscular reaction in my ears and my mouth to, then it changes.
So a very concrete thing that people can actually do in practice is then try and listen for your echo.
Yeah.
Which I'm now trying to do now, and I can actually feel my body changes. There was just like 2 centimeters of my chest coming up to listen to my echo.
Yeah. There's a very interesting guy, it's called Stephen Porges, who has done some searching on how our cranial nerves, the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus, how it works. And our larynx is invaded by the 10th cranial nerve, so both the outer muscles and the inner muscles. So, and that is linked to our sensation of feeling safe. So if I get nervous or I get scared or something like that, it will shut down. And then my body will protect myself. And the most vulnerable part we have here in our bodies are our larynx and our voices, or our neck. So it will shut down and try to protect. So you see, now you can hear that I'm sort of making a little tension in my voice here, because I'm sort of stepping back, I'm tensioning up, and that affects my voice. That's why we can hear when people are nervous.
Yeah.
Because it links to our larynx and to our diaphragm and our breathing.
But it's fascinating how you can now become cautious of trying to listen to my voice. And it's funny, when I listen to my voice, I just, my posture changes.
Yes. And that's the way I work now, is instead of telling you, you need to stand up straight, you need to do this, you need to articulate clearly, you need to breathe down there, and So you see, I scatter in a lot of details, and we can't cope so many details. So by focusing on one thing that you can do, let the details emerge by themselves. So I sort of bypass all the details and see, what is the reason why your voice should be resonant and clear? Is that when you're safe and you're feeling comfortable, your voice will help you. It will be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating also how you get different sounds out. So again, like going back to Kim True North, I've been facilitating many places, but this is with young kids often in kind of a sports setting, or like what do you call it, where you can play football.
Yeah.
So it's a really big role, right? And we go for 5 days, and my voice was starting to like get worn out.
Yeah.
But then I had to tell a story in a different voice, and I had no problem breaking through. Suddenly I was speaking from something else, and I was like fighting, but like suddenly I could speak over the entire room.
Yeah.
No problem. So I was like, where did that come from? Why couldn't I activate that? Like in other settings, I was like, how did I suddenly just get such a powerful voice telling this story? And when I was facilitating some of the other stuff, I was like struggling with some of my voice.
Well, I do not know what's happening inside of you, but I guess would be that when you are facilitating, you're very aware of yourself. You're sort of aware of your need to connect to everybody. So you're sort of a little beside yourself and you're very focused on how you perform. But when you focus on the story, then you're not the important part. The audience is not, but the story is. So you're actually talking about something. And when we do that, our focuses goes on the story about the topic between us.
Yeah.
So, and when we do that, suddenly you're not aware of what you're doing. You're just telling a story. And that's, I mean, we've been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years. But facilitating a workshop in a sports arena or whatever, that's something new.
Yeah.
So you go back to the original reason why we are speaking. I've got a very good story I want to tell you.
Yeah.
So focusing on not the words and not the audience, but the reactions on the content. That's the reason why we speak, is that my words are not the most important thing. No, it's the reaction in you. So you build the relationship. And when we build relationships, our body says, oh yes, now I know why I'm speaking. Yes, it makes sense to me now. And then you find that extra energy to your voice.
Yeah. It's fascinating. What can you do? I actually like to go to the advanced stuff because many of the fundamentals you can find online, right? But someone like Tony Robbins, his voice is almost gone.
Yeah.
How do you avoid, if you're someone that gives a lot of speeches or facilitate, that your voice ends up being like a Tony Robbins where you can hardly speak, right?
Well, I do not know what's happening to Tony Robinson's voice, but if you're sort of forcing it, I mean, it's muscles and also sort of a modified skin on top of that. So, for instance, if I'm out in my kayak and I'm going for a long trip, I get what you call those blisters. Yeah. So because my skin is worn out by too much work, and that could also happen to your voice. So if you sort of shout too long or whatever, it's like, you wear them out because they get sort of rubbed against each other. So you can get a lot of things on your voice. And also if you've been shouting at a football match or something like that, you can get bleedings on your voice, and then you can get a little scar there. And that can affect your voice so that it's not coming back to the natural voice. So we need to rule that out.
Yeah.
There's not something physically wrong with the voice.
But for him, I know it's physically wrong. Like they took down and measured and saw that he should barely be able to speak any longer.
Okay.
And they were always like, it's almost a miracle. I don't remember how he explained it, but like some of the stuff that's apparently supposed to get the voice out through, were just like so paper thin.
Yeah.
So that's probably from having taught so long and like speaking with a voice, potentially too high and so on.
So if you're not used to speaking in big rooms, I mean, then if I again translate it into some, for instance, sports.
Yeah.
If I were to run a marathon tomorrow, I wouldn't be able to do that because my muscles are not fit for that, and I'm not fit anyway for that. So, and then I need to train my voice so that the muscular strength is there.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But the way that you do it is that we need to take away the strain from the breathing, because if I'm shouting, I got a lot of pressure from my breathing. Hi, hey, ah. So if I'm shouting, I'm sort of making a very compressed tension in my vocal cords.
Ooh.
So I need to sort of reduce that high pressure on the breathing out so that the vocal cords are not sort of holding back to all that air that is sort of blown at them all the time. And then there's the techniques that you can use, but I usually trust that the body can do it on their own. So we sort of separate. If you're going to speak a whole day in a big room, you need to be fit. I could feel here after Corona, but I hadn't been speaking to anybody. My voice was sort of, I need to practice a little because I could feel that my muscles were sort of weak.
Yeah.
So if we separate that, then I think one of the best advices I've got is listen for your echo, because that will give that physical connection to your voice, so that you use your body to resonate.
Yeah.
And that's why my company is called Voice Incorporated. It's because you can't sort of have a voice without the body. So to get a voice that is been able to speak loud is that you need to connect downwards. I use this metaphor that the higher the mast on a ship, the lower the keel you need to have. So if you need to speak loud, you need to think more down in your body. And it becomes a little technical, but actually there's some muscles in your back that is linked to your diaphragm, and you need to use them. And my old master, he said, well, it's like have that balloon feeling. So instead of making sort of, like that, I'm pressuring, I need to think outwards. And he had this lovely metaphor. Speaking should always feel as if you're drinking a cold beer on a hot summer's day. So that when you drink a beer, your throat is open. And where does the beer go? It goes into your stomach, and that sort of fills out space. So that you always have this spacious feeling inside of you, that you don't sort of squeak in and make yourself small, but you're big and you're broad. So there you have the voice. Very short.
Yeah, got it.
Explanation on how to smack up. Yes.
You have a tennis ball?
Yep.
Tell me about that. I love to play with different balls and sports and so on, but there's a special reason for that.
Yes, there's a special reason for that. That's because when we speak, we're so focused on getting the words out, so that we have a tendency to forget that body. So what I do is that I take this tennis ball and I ask people to say just one information at a time. And I'll explain later why that is. And then you need to bounce the ball into the floor and then speak the nanosecond the ball touches your hand. Not before, not after. Right on that spot where it touches your hand. And then something happens to the speaker's voice, because what is happening is that the person is so focused on catching the tennis ball. And catching a tennis ball is actually quite complex. You can't sort of go strategically to that task. You just need to be in the moment and go with the flow. When we speak, we have a tendency to say, okay, now I do this, now I need to do it, and I think I can speak strategically. I think I can make a plan. Say, now I need to take a pause, I need to think of 3 seconds, and then I need to and then my tempo is not too high, not too low. I need to look to the left, I need to look a little to the right. So I sort of make a plan, a sort of Excel sheet where I need to, yes, done that, So I'm focused on details. But when I'm catching a tennis ball, I can't do that. So I'm sort of disrupting people. So when you catch the tennis ball, what is happening is that your body is dynamic. So it is moving. When we get nervous or we have this focus, now I need to perform, we have a tendency to tension up in our bodies. It becomes static. So I sort of provoke people to be dynamic. And then the focus on the tennis ball is that you get a good intonation in your voice and your breathing becomes free because the body is moving, and so focusing on the tennis ball, not on breathing and speaking. So body first, words afterwards. And that will bring that sort of adequate breathing. And also something happens to the intonation. That is the difference between now I prepared this speech, I put all my lines and I made everything. So it can make any manuscript sound spontaneous.
Interesting.
So
I have 3 of them at home.
Yeah.
I have to practice with that.
Mm.
So that's another way of actually practicing and becoming more natural.
Yeah, but then, I mean, the exercise doesn't do it by itself. You need to be aware of what is happening.
Yeah.
So that you see, okay, the principles of catching a tennis ball, what is that? Is that when you catch a ball, you are ready to react. You're not acting. You're not throwing the ball away. No, you're catching something. You are reacting. And for me, when we speak of charisma and presence and all that, I'm so bold. I'm saying, I don't care what you do, because that's not what's interesting. It's what you are able to do that's catching my attention. So that when I sort of transform that tennis ball exercise, I need to take the principles. I need to say, okay, I'm ready to react now. So if anyone at the audience in love to me would catch a tennis ball to me, I should be ready to catch it. If I translate, when you take the word, speak out, you become the leader in that moment. So I donate my attention in your arms, and you sort of pay me back by showing me trust. And if I sort of take that to an extreme, that if you're a leader on the savannah, wherever we once were, and you are guiding me, trust to me is that if I fall, you will catch me. So when someone takes the word or conquer the room and, I want to speak, that is, don't worry, I will catch you all. I will guide you safely. So, and that is what happens to us, because we have this, just the mere idea of being physical will affect our whole body. So that I'm ready to react. If anybody does anything, I will respond to you. And that's presence. And that is also helping the voice to become connected, because you are connected to yourself. I can't connect to you if you're not connected to you. I mean, if you as a speaker is not connected to yourself, how can I connect to you as an audience?
Yeah, that's that hard thing where you feel like is someone authentic or not.
Yeah.
Do you feel them when they're speaking, right?
Yeah.
And that's at least what I feel for myself often when I teach. And I think that's probably why I normally get positive feedback. I have a harder time practicing speaking.
Yeah.
Because part of me speaking is connecting to the audience and taking in. So I wouldn't say I hate, but I dislike the practicing having to say the things.
Yeah.
Because it's a very different physical reaction that when I'm speaking with a crowd, like I'm no longer in my head, I'm in my body, but where if I'm practicing, then I'm just in my head practicing saying the words and trying to do like some kind of act.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because when we practice, I mean, it's meaningless. And our whole brains and body says, what are you doing? This sounds awkward. What? Stop it. So we have this small devil on our shoulders and sounds awful. And then we are sort of defocused. So actually what I've done is I'm not focusing on practicing. You can do that. You can do whatever you want to. I'm sort of focusing, what can you do in the moment when you're there to help yourself to be present?
Yeah.
And how can we strengthen that link to the audience? Because practicing is really awkward.
It is. But I also feel it's important so you know what you're going to say. So I get into the point that you know your material well enough. So, like these are, for me, I kind of feel like roots. Like I have to touch on these like bullet points more than write the entire thing, because remembering an entire script doesn't work for me.
No.
But I do need to remember kind of my path.
Yeah.
And then a few corner sentences, like this. Sometimes if you say it in a specific way, people will react to it in another way, right?
Yeah, and as an actress, I know how hard it is to learn a manuscript by heart. Yeah, and then the other part is how to make it come alive as if you're saying it for the first time in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the difficult part. But the way you can practice at home, when you have that, you practice your script or saying the key lines or whatever, is that you can also trigger your brain to sort of imagine that you're speaking with someone. So for instance, the echo, you could also use that when you practice. Does this sound right? Does it make sense to me? But you can also imagine that you are speaking with someone and having this focus on, it's not your words, but into reaction.
Yeah.
And as an actress, if you're on a film screen or wherever, you don't have that, your co-actor on the other side. So I imagine that I'm talking with someone, and you can actually do that to yourself when you're practicing. And the exercise is also a little exaggerating because we need to exaggerate to find out what's happening underneath. So when I'm speaking with you, I'm looking at you, expecting a reaction. So while I'm speaking, I'm looking at you and I'm sort of transmitting, are you with me? Do you get it? So I have this non-spoken intention underneath everything I say. So if I have a text that I'm practicing, for instance, if I have this Shakespeare text, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. So how to make that come alive is I need to imagine that I'm talking to someone and I'm saying, okay, friends, do you get it? Are you with me? Romans, are you still with me? So I'm sort of saying that out loud. Countrymen, did you get that? Lend me your ears. Are you with me? I come to bury Caesar. Are you still following me? Not to bury him, to praise him, sorry. Are you still with me? So I sort of make my brain imagine that I'm talking with someone. And then I take that spoken question and I'm sort of immaterialize, whatever it's called. And have this as a non-spoken intention underneath. So I just think it. So friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. And that I can do on my own. So I'm sort of imagine, are you with me? Did you get it? Are you still with me? So I sort of take the essence of a dialogue and I transform my monologue into a dialogue. And that's what we do as people. We do not have monologues, nothing. They do not exist. We speak with people, and that's a dialogue. So when you practice at home, imitate the dialogue because then it will make sense.
Yeah. I guess that also, so I tried for the first time to record a course where I had a teleprompter.
Yeah.
And that felt very unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I was no longer just being my own playful, but I did get much sharper words and better words to the point.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing. I tried to imagine someone sitting on the other side and then I was actually speaking to someone. So that I had that feeling, but it was still more unnatural to actually. Would you recommend not doing a teleprompter and then just...
It's kind of temperament, who you are and how you can cope with things that will help you. I mean, a teleprompter should be a help.
Yeah.
But when you have those kinds of tools, you need to practice with them so that you master them.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, our queen, she has a manuscript. And suddenly one year when she did the New Year's speech, the papers got mixed up. So yes, she had her help, but there, it failed her. So you see, we can't sort of say, yes, I got all the tools to help me. Yes, it's going to function for me. We still need to be present and have practice with it so that we know how it works and all that. So, tools are good, but you need to sort of let them be a help.
Yeah.
For instance, also, if you have a microphone, if you're in a big room and say, I need a microphone, then we have a tendency to really turn on volume because then I don't need to speak very loud because then the microphone will help me. And by doing that, I sort of disconnect to my body. And yes, the microphone will help me, the loudspeakers help me with volume. But there's one thing that the microphone can't help you with, and that's tempo. So you really need to still listen for your echo in the room, the auditive feedback from your own voice or the mic, the loudspeakers, so that you can adjust your tempo to that specific room. So you still need to listen, even though you have a microphone. And don't let the microphone carry you. I mean, you've got a voice, you've got a body, and it works. So let it work, because that creates the presence on stage. I mean, if I'm in the opera house out here, I'm looking at someone down there, and I hear that sound coming out of the loudspeakers. Sort of, it's like I'm in the radio, I'm listening, but that thing that I'm looking at on the stage is not connecting with me. So I can't feel that person speaking. I can only hear that person. I can't feel. And it's when I connect to the speaker in the room and I can feel that person, I connect to the content much more than if I'm just listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a big part of your work is getting people present and actually feeling themselves.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, at least from my own experience, it's always like when you connect to someone. What about the other technical parts? Is that something that's like, that's so simple? It's just like, you know what you have to do, or like how you move with your body, or is that something you go into as well?
Yeah, but I all the time have that focus that how do you feel?
Yeah.
Can you feel difference?
You can also see the difference on someone like they learn like, I need to use my hands.
Yeah.
And it looks so unnatural. I was told like one of the reasons why hands look unnatural is if it doesn't hit the rhythm. So like when you need to use your hands, it needs to hit the rhythm of your voice as well.
Yeah, because actually our gestures go ahead of our voices. Because our hands are our old language. It's the first language we as humans learned in our evolutionary travel. So our gestures comes a little before, milliseconds before the words. Because our gestures is sort of building, a sort of kind of imaginary Lego, yeah. And then our gestures, oh, what have I just built? And then our voices put the label on what I've just built with my gestures. And if it comes at the same time, it's unauthentic.
Yeah.
So instead of telling you what to do with your hands, I would rather invite you to use your hands. So having those principles underneath, why are we using our hands? To create images in people. So for instance, if you're peeling an orange, could you explain to me how you peel an orange? Well, then you take your hand, yes.
Yeah.
Then you show me, you show me with your hands. You have this imaginary orange here. So what we do then is, okay, if you are going to do a lecture on how to peel an orange, we take a tangible orange. What am I doing? Okay. Then we have the imaginary orange, and then we write it down. And then I edit my content, and then I edit again, and then I learn it by heart. But we still need to make those words be linked to the orange. They are empty words if you do not think of the orange while you speak.
Interesting.
So to make people use your gestures is inviting them to use them instead of, oh, then you need to do this and then you need to do that. And then it becomes really sort of, what's happening to those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that when you're like, please stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a person's disconnected to the content. Yeah.
Yeah, and it becomes too much. But that's like everything. If you don't have the balance, like you hear one advice, and whether it's food or anything else, like you need to have that balance of something that seems authentic or feels authentic.
Yeah. It feels authentic because what I need to do if I'm coaching you, whatever, I need to make myself redundant. You need to work with yourself. You need to know when you're there.
Yeah.
Because if I tell you, oh, this is the right tempo, or no, this is not the right tempo, it's too slow, this is too fast. No, your pauses need to be a little longer. No, at least, no, that was too long. Or you need to do this with your hand. Then you think more about me judging you when you're there instead of being with yourself. So what do you feel? Does this make sense? Can you feel the difference? How does your body feel now? Okay. How did you do that? What happened there? So make people aware and connect to themselves so they don't need me. I know it's a hell of a business plan, but it works that way. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. What about for all of the, what would you say, people that have some language as their first and then have to speak in another language, whether it be English, Italian, Spanish, and so on. But let's just stick to English to start with. What are some good tips to get that more natural voice and that better accent? Because
well, it's sort of nil on my edge of my knowledge, but what I do with, for instance, Danish-speaking people who needs to speak English in a more fluent way is that
work with the principles of how to make you articulate clearly. And that is focusing, for me, it's focusing on the resonance of your voice. And it becomes a little technical, but instead of focusing on details, on this sound is like this, and this sound is like this, and sort of make a sort of a space where articulation is good.
Yeah.
So away from the details and focusing on something that you can do all the time that will create that clear and fast articulation, even though it's unfamiliar.
Yeah. It's something that's difficult. And so I've figured out, at least my girlfriend comes on, and I speak more from my stomach when I speak Danish than when I speak English.
Yeah.
But my accent is very dependent on who I talk to.
Yeah.
So, and who have been around for a while.
Yeah.
So I can have a fairly nice accent, or I can have a very broken English, Danish, English accent.
Yeah.
Which is quite fascinating, like how, because your voice also feels very much like your identity.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
So, especially when you have to speak another language, then you kind of step into a new identity that might not necessarily be as much as who you are as a person, right?
And that's because we sort of monitor ourselves by listening to our own voices. We know that morning when we wake up and our throat is sore. Oh, I feel sick today.
Yeah.
So we sort of, who am I? Am I my own good self while I'm listening to myself? So we monitor ourselves because that's a way we connect to who we are.
Yeah.
And when we speak in a different language, a foreign language, it's completely right that you say, I'm sort of not that person. It's a foreign person. Who is that? And also the reason why we go up into our heads is that we sort of, the words are not there, how do you say this? Is this the right word? So we get very intellectual, and that's why we sort of disconnect to our bodies. Yeah.
Makes sense. That's probably at least what I can resonate with, that my accent is better, going back to some stuff that you said earlier, when you feel very at ease.
But there's also something else at stake here, is that we mirror each other.
Yes.
Yeah. So, if I'm with people who speaks, I'm sort of, is this what we sound like here? So I mix in with that group. I mirror the other people that is in this group. And I say, okay, if I sort of imitate this, I must be part of this group.
Yeah.
And then we'll go into another group and say, okay, this is how we speak in here. And we do it all the time. It's just when we speak in a foreign language, becomes very aware of what's happening. But we do it also in Danish. We do it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, you have people coming from Jutland. When they're in Copenhagen, they speak more that accent. When they're back in Jutland, they might go back to speaking that accent.
Yeah. And also people get, you've been to Copenhagen. I can hear that. But also when we go back to our native, our child's home or whatever, so then it snaps like that. And then we're back home.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It happens with our body as well, that we're mirroring, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, the less strong the core is, the easier it is to just kind of flow to mirroring other people, where, at least with my voice, I haven't been that much in Jutland, but I imagine that it's more stable, where at least my second language, English, is much more determined on, have I been around Australians, have I been around people that also have as a second language, then it becomes much more broken. Have I been around Americans, then it becomes more and more the dialect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also because we've learned English late in our lives, where our native language is from our childhood. And that is, I think it's something about that you need to learn a language before you turn into the teens, because when you go into the teenage years, then our body says, okay, now we practiced, we've sort of summed up everything, and now we're going that path.
Yeah.
So I think it's about, just when you go into teenage years, then it's very difficult to learn a language without having slight accent of some kind from your native speaking.
Yeah, it takes more work, but still possible, but just more work.
Yeah, well, also if you're going to learn to play a violin, you can't make that speed if you learn playing the violin after the teens.
you need to have it in through the childhood, because that's where the connections in your brain comes. And you can't, you can practice, but you can't get that speed.
No.
You can be fast, but you can't get the same speed as if you were taught as a child.
So violin, I have to give up that.
Well, you can play great violin, but yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Lisbeth, time is running. I promise you could get to your next meeting.
Yeah.
Where can people find more about you?
Well, my website, voiceincorporated.dk.
Yeah.
I also have a blog, but that's in Danish. I have a LinkedIn profile where I sometimes also write in English, where people also can get some tips and tricks from me. So,
I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. You do one-on-one coaching and workshops?
Yeah. And also lectures. It's a whole variety of teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I met you the first time, that was actually at a company workshop where we were taking turns on getting time to practice on how we presented best for clients or if we're doing workshops and so on. So that's the kind of work as well.
Yes, that is. I do a lot of pitch training, so startups and all that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Lisbeth, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.